All right, I am here with Ken Shepro, Blackmoor player and wargamer extraordinaire, looking from everything that he's got here. Uh, Ken, if we could start off with this, when did you start wargaming?
I started wargaming when I was about 10 years old. It would have been around 1960. And we had a game that was put out by Avalon Hill called Tactics 2.
Okay,
And we played that, and then was more interested in the historical ones. And so when they came out, I got actually before that, I had a friend who had a game called Gettysburg
mm-hmm,
by Avalon Hill, and we would go to his house and we would play Gettysburg. And he was the only one that really had the rules, and so we played by his interpretation of the rules, which I
sure.
found out about 3 years later was completely wrong.
Oh,
Uh,
was Gettysburg a complicated game? I've not played it myself.
no, it was actually very simplistic.
Mm-hmm,
It had the die cut counters. The original Gettysburg was on a board that had squares
okay,
before the hexagons.
mm-hmm,
And, everybody they had the different units. And one of the things that in retrospect I found interesting is if you've seen the movie Gettysburg,
mm-hmm,
one of the big parts in the movie is played by General Buford, who
mm-hmm.
was the cavalry commander on the first day.
Yeah,
And he does not appear in the original Gettysburg game because what's there are the two regiments, Gamble and Devon's regiments.
mm-hmm,
But Buford's not even mentioned. If it weren't for Jeff Shara, the novelist writing the book, we probably wouldn't even know about Buford. But anyway, so my friend was always the Confederates. We were always the Union.
mm-hmm.
Confederates always won. Uh,
Interesting.
yes, well, one of the things and then he got Chancellorsville when Chancellorsville came out, and same result. Yeah, Confederates
Yeah.
always won.
I've read some stuff about these games not actually having what we would call game balance today because people simply want there to be a decent chance of either player winning out.
Well, I'll give you my philosophy on that, which I think also sort of tracks.
Hmm.
So they began to do more and more games, and
Okay.
of course, at the time, we all thought Avalon Hill must be this big company. We
Hmm.
find out later it's like three guys actually, but
Yeah,
they
pretty
had a
small world.
newsletter.
Hmm.
Uh, so then in 1961, they had D-Day, which is the Normandy invasion,
Yeah.
right? And then I think at that point they decided to reissue Gettysburg
Hmm.
with the
Makes sense.
hexagons. So it's new Gettysburg game
Hmm.
made it. They got rid of a lot of the things that people didn't like about the first game, and uh, same. Well, Chancellorsville had hexagons. They didn't reissue that, and apparently that was not a very successful game because uh, on a board game it's almost impossible to replicate what really happened during the battle because most of it, you studied the battle, was all about Hooker not having any idea what the Confederates are doing.
So fought the war. Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you look at the battlefield setup,
Hmm.
the Union has such an overwhelming advantage that there's no way that you're going to be fooled while you watch this guy slowly march from his men down around to your
Hmm.
rear. They're not going to make it. uh, unless you were my friend who was the Confederates. And in that game, the artillery could fire two squares.
That's pretty
Say,
cool.
well,
Yeah.
instead of one, right? Say it had to be adjacent. So he decided that that meant that if the artillery fired on the
Hmm.
infantry you didn't roll the dice, they were gone because they couldn't fire back, right? And so that tended to eat up, and the Union artillery were grouped by corps, which is the
Hmm.
way they were organized, and the Confederates were by battalion. So there were lots of little Confederate ones and twos
Hmm.
artillery and a few big Union things. Well, all he had to do was put his little ones and twos, scattered them around, and essentially annihilate the entire Union army from far range.
Hmm.
Well, obviously not what happened. So it was not a very, that version wasn't a very popular with us. But D-Day was a good game. They tried to design the victory conditions. That was
Hmm.
always sort of the hard part. And from there, I'll skip ahead because I'm already talking too much about those. But what Avalon Hill tried to do after a while, there was a designer who I never met, but I think his name was Dunzelman.
Okay.
And his theory was he wanted to make a point. So, for example, he came out with a wonderful game called Jutland. It's the big naval battle of 1916, the
Hmm.
only time the the German and the British fleets actually met in major combat. And uh, you needed just about a gymnasium floor to play it. All right.
So it's on the scale of one of those Fletcher kind of games, right?
Yeah, I mean, you needed, so yeah, I mean, fire across the room.
Hmm.
Well, the victory conditions, which were arbitrary, but basically, uh, for the British to win, they basically had to wipe out the German fleet.
Okay.
For the Germans to win, they had to wipe out enough of the British fleet that they wouldn't be able to harass the German fleet. Essentially, what you found, which played the game, is neither side could come close. And in the real battle was British strategic victory and
Hmm.
German tactical victory. British, the British were appalled at the losses they suffered because they had many of their best ships were just blown up. Uh, there was an inquiry, but as Churchill wrote about the battle, Admiral Jellicoe, the British commander, was the only commander on either side who could lose the war in one day.
Hmm.
And that guided his philosophy, which is I'm not there to be another Nelson or win a Trafalgar. As long as the German fleet has to turn around and run away, I win. So, and the German philosophy was we will sortie, we will get a portion of the British fleet to come out and we will pulverize them and gradually wear them down.
Yeah.
And so both sides had different ideas of what would happen. But anyway, so that game, which I don't think was very popular because first off, it was hard to play in your basement.
Right.
And
Of course.
secondly, uh, people didn't really like to play a game that might take 2 days to play and nobody really wins. Say, yep, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. So they came out with 1914, World War One, trench warfare. What's the point? Yeah, I can't win.
Well, how are you supposed to actually go from one trench to another when you couldn't even pull it off in real life?
Yeah. So, and there were more and more of those games. And then at that point, you had Strategy and Tactics magazine come
Hmm.
out. They had their game of the month.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were not deeply thought out, but there were a lot of them and enough of the rules. And so there was that. But skipping way ahead. Uh, and then they had Africa Corps. That was another game. And I had the idea that, I would take D-Day, Stalingrad, which was their Russian front
Hmm.
game, and Africa Corps. We'd all go to my house. We'd put people in different rooms. I made one battlefield myself, which was essentially everything in between France, Russia, Germany, and Africa. So
Hmm.
we had a board, put the Supreme Commander in one room with that, and everybody else was dispersed around. And so you had to write orders are you going to send troops to Africa? Okay, well, write them up. And
Yeah.
so we would have three games going simultaneously. Uh,
Can I ask a question about that real quick? Um, Between moves or turns, was there a certain time limit between
yeah,
the
so
issuance of an
right,
order and when it would
yes.
arrive?
Now, one of the problems always with a lot of these games is they are very time consuming.
Hmm.
And sort of for the miniatures, with the time increments 3 minutes,
Yeah.
people play for 6 hours And depending on how complicated it is, how large the battle is, you could spend 12 hours and you have lapsed, like 30 minutes of actual battle time.
Yeah.
And when you get people like me or Dave Wesely who proceed to give you a commentary during the move, it maybe triples or quadruples
Hmm.
the amount of time that you're spending doing it. And so sometimes when I would be in a tournament with Dave, and I'd say, Dave, we got to move this
Yeah,
along,
I was
right?
a little long.
Right. People
Yeah.
came here to play the game, and so far we've had two real turns. So anyway, so I go off to college, and I meet two guys that are in ROTC, and I go to college in Baltimore, Maryland, at Johns Hopkins. And then eventually I go to the graduate school, which they had down in Washington, D.C. So I'm there. My friends in the ROTC who are seniors, they're stuck in Baltimore, and they call up and they say, here's this guy that we met who's looking for players to play a Napoleonic campaign game.
Yeah.
Want to come up and meet him? Sure, why not? So I go up and I meet Second Lieutenant Dave Wesely, who is in the Army Ordnance at
Hmm.
Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland on
Hmm.
assignment. And he introduces us to miniature tabletop wargaming. And he brought some troops with him. They were Civil War troops.
Sure.
And so we fought the Battle of Key Blanks, Virginia. Now, why is it Key Blanks, Virginia? Because there was a town that was the town. And the only thing he had was a box of key blanks.
Yeah.
So I named it the Battle of Key Blanks as he puts the box in the middle of the thing. And so we fight the battle. We're all pretty enthralled by this, pretty
Hmm.
cool stuff. And then he introduces us to the campaign. And of course, he's coming from the Twin Cities. And up in the Twin Cities is this massive Napoleonic recreation starting in 1801.
Hmm.
And all of the great names, Dave McGarry, Dave Arneson, Dave Wesely, etc., all have different roles in that game. And somewhere along the line, apparently somebody said, well, one of the big important parts during the Napoleonic War is the Caribbean. And as all the fighting is going on over there because there's vast wealth and
All that sugar.
coming from all that
Yeah.
sugar and rum and so forth. So, uh, Dave, you're out there in the eastern Maryland. Why don't you see if you can get a group together and they can be the Caribbean? So that's what happened. We became the Caribbean. And sometimes we would do just individual assignments, or they would have to, like, I think one of my first roles, which was essentially one day, was I was the Viceroy of New Spain,
Hmm.
being New Spain being Mexico, Cuba, and not South America. And the issue presented was smuggling.
Oh, delicious.
Smuggling. So the problem is that everybody's smuggling stuff into Cuba and out, and so they're not collecting duties and revenue and so forth. What are you gonna do about it, Viceroy? And so I think about it for a while. And after a while, and of course, Dave is sitting in the corner rolling dice about my decision making. And I finally figure out that at an enormous cost that would probably bankrupt the King of Spain, I could put enough people out on the coast and I would interdict about 90% of the smuggling traffic.
Hmm.
But we can't afford it. Now, if I do nothing, we'll also be bankrupt. So I have to find a balance of just enough people to scare the bad guys. It's not worth the risk without spending too much money. So that was my first assignment. Then the uh, French decided that they were going to invade, try to capture Jamaica
Hmm.
and the major British sugar islands. And so I and one of my friends were told off to be the British defending, and the other guys were the French. And so we fought a whole campaign in Jamaica uh, with now compared to the number of troops that are fighting in Western Europe,
Hmm.
very small. But what that allowed is it allowed for a lot more sort of fun and variance because we don't have as many troops to move around. So it doesn't
Yeah.
take very long.
The
So we
different
could
kinds of
sit there
engagements.
and come up with schemes and write songs and things like that. So, for example, at one point, um, my friend and I had the British were getting blown up because we didn't have any heavy gun ships, and the French are blowing up. But they land at the far end of the island. They're going through the jungle, and in the meantime, the British fleet is some about four ships, but they're sitting off. We have to abandon Kingston and retreat into the fort itself,
Hmm.
which is impregnable. Uh, but we want to do something to the French. So we find that they're uh, they're coming into shore. So we decide after reading some of the books that are written about the British that we're going to do a cutting out expedition.
Hmm.
You know what that we
It sounds like you head on out under maybe cover of darkness
well,
to
right,
take
yeah.
care
You
of it.
send a small group and you
Yeah.
go and you try to like seize the ship when they're
Hmm.
not paying attention. So we go through that and we managed to succeed. I mean, Dave says, "Well, you have no chance of doing it. Somebody's rolling dice." And say, you
There's
can
always a
sit there,
chance.
say, "Egad, egad, egad." Okay, well, everything went right. We cut it out. We went back. So we wrote a song about it and then took it back to the Twin Cities. So anyway, so we're having a good time doing this.
Yeah. Now,
And
before we move on to that, I got one question about
yeah,
Jamaica. You're talking about how effectively you're making economic decisions as a governor, and then Arneson is in the
yeah.
corner and he's making probabilities based on the dice.
Well,
Uh,
Wesely.
I was Weston.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Arneson's in Minneapolis.
sorry, I got that
Wesley's
mixed
down
up.
in Baltimore with
Hmm.
us. Okay.
So um, I've been reading some older wargaming stuff from Tony Bath and Donald Featherstone from
Hmm.
England. Did Wesley read those books to kind of get some ideas from that? Because there's a similar thing I've read where Bath is sitting down and he's trying to arbitrate how something works. He comes up with the probability of different things and just rolls it and says, "All right, here's what."
Yeah, but a lot of this he would, I mean, we didn't really know what we had to do because
Hmm.
he's rolling the dice.
Yeah.
So we say what we want to do. And the other thing which I sort of liked is, um, I mean, some people did it, is now rules aren't written down.
Hmm.
So they're sort of in his head. But I noticed that one, asking questions, right? If you didn't ask questions, you would be surprised.
Hmm.
You know, somebody's, I want to charge those guns. Well, and sometimes Dave would say, your aide is tugging at your coat and saying, "Sir, don't you realize that, canister at 100 yards, it's going to like blow everyone?" Oh, no, I didn't think of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's but uh, if I would, he liked ingenuity. So we come up with something ingenious. Uh, he wouldn't say it works, but he would say, "Oh, take it a shot." Now, we had time to do that because we weren't trying to manipulate armies of 50,000 men. But anyway, so somewhere along the line, um, I get invited to come up to Minneapolis and
Hmm.
meet all these people that we only know about because of their orders, but he's described them, and they're all kind of what are now in some cases dear departed, but people like Dave McGarry, uh, Ed Rockford, Dave Arneson, and I go up and I'm meeting all these young people, and it's pretty cool. And
Hmm.
so I get to participate in some of that, uh, become enormously impressed with Dave Arneson's research because one of the reason predicates for the game is that he had meticulously researched. So he had an order of battle for army and named ships by name for virtually every European country as of 1801. Denmark's got this many ships of the
Hmm.
line, they got so many frigates, etc. And it was, I mean, enormous amounts of land. And this is all before the days even a,
Yeah, it's not just a
computer
internet
research.
search away.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, a lot of this is just sitting in the library and compiling from all these different books. So phenomenal amount of research. And so this is all kind of pre-Dungeons and
Of
Dragons.
course.
Okay. So anyway, so I'm even more excited. We go back to Baltimore. Dave gets transferred to Alaska.
Hmm.
So he's at Fort Greely in Alaska. And again, we're still corresponding. And by this time, we've all graduated. Oh, now I am in law school in Chicago. So he's lets me know he's coming back from Alaska. And so uh, why don't I go out and meet him in Seattle? He has to pick up his car, and then we'll drive from Seattle back to Minneapolis.
Okay.
Oh, we had to, I think we had to go to Fort Leavenworth for him to be officially discharged from the Army. So we do that. We drive across and talk and talk and talk and talk, end up back in Minneapolis. So at this point, Arneson is starting to experiment with his uh, Blackmoor and Dungeons and Dragons game.
Hmm.
And so I'm up there. Now, oh, at this point is when Gary Gygax and the people in Lake Geneva became involved in the Napoleonic game. Uh, and they were the Americans.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it's in the
you say,
documentary. Yeah.
right. So they said, okay, well, we got the Caribbean. Like Geneva people want to participate, they can be the Americans.
Hmm.
Now, the fatal mistake that Arneson and Wesely made in the game is that anything that existed at the time you could use, and if you spent enough money, you could get enough of it. So,
Hmm.
for example, Major Patrick Ferguson invented the Ferguson rifle. Major Patrick Ferguson was a inventor in the War Office during the American Revolution, and he invented a breech loading rifle. And he had one company that tested it, and it worked really well.
Hmm.
But of course, the War Office was the brown vest is good enough for the Duke of Marlborough. It's good enough for us.
The newfangled stuff,
And
right?
yeah, and all ran really well. So Ferguson gets sent off to command a group of loyalists in South Carolina,
Hmm.
and they ended up being isolated in the middle of the Southern campaign. And on the Battle of Kings Mountain, they are utterly annihilated, and Ferguson is killed. So nothing really comes of his rifle company. Well, the Americans, oh, look at that. If we spend all our money on Ferguson rifles, we will have an entire army equipped with Ferguson rifles. And compared to the Brown Bess, the range and the rate of fire is overwhelming.
Hmm.
And so, and then, gee, this guy invented the steamboat, which was sort of laughed at for a long time before Fulton even.
Yeah.
So they end up eventually constructing a fleet of breech loading cannon on their sailing ships, which are now powered by steam, and they're riflemen, and they basically end up overrunning all of Europe, thus causing, I mean, this is,
Yeah.
and it sort of ruined it. The problem is that all of the other factors that would have gone into that.
Hmm.
I mean, for example, Jefferson didn't want to spend any money on the Navy. And one of the things that fascinated me is because my game is War of 1812.
Hmm.
The definitive naval history in this country of the War of 1812 is still called a naval history of the War of 1812 by 24-year-old Theodore Roosevelt.
Still,
Still,
that's
yep,
impressive.
still considered to be his research. But he is very opinionated.
Of course.
And
STR.
he has nothing but nasty things. Jefferson is the worst president ever.
Hmm.
Of course, later on, TR became the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So he is big into the naval stuff.
Hmm.
And his criticism, because Jefferson was cheap, so didn't want to spend any money on ships, so he built gunboats.
Yeah.
And the gunboats were like ridiculous. They were totally worthless. They weren't really any good for coastal defense. So he just has chapters in his book that just talk about Jefferson being totally incompetent, the worst
Hmm.
president ever, etc. Uh, Now, because he was a Republican, and Jefferson was what were called the Republicans, but really became the Democrats. But anyway, so they're going to restart the Napoleonic game with different set of rules.
Yeah.
But by this point, they decide that everybody there is more into Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm busy in law school, so I sort of fall away from them for a few years. And then uh, Dave Wesely says, "Oh, a bunch of us are coming down for uh, Gen Con." And at that point, they'd been running it for a number of years because I went to Gen Con 7, which was in Lake Geneva. And I come to find out like a couple weeks ago, that was the only time it was ever in Lake Geneva. After that, they had to move it elsewhere because it's
Got too
too
big.
big, right?
Hmm.
So I go there and uh, and I'm listening to what's going on, and I'm now a newly minted lawyer. And Dave Arneson is already starting to get into trouble with Gygax over who controls the game,
Hmm.
Dungeons and Dragons. They form TSR Hobbies. Uh, Arneson agrees to be a 49% shareholder, and so he's got stock. He's an employee of the company and so forth. But he's already discovering that Gygax wants to do things in a different way. And Dave, wonderful, brilliant guy, didn't really have much of a head for business.
Hmm.
And Gygax is always looking at, how can I make money off of this? And so they're not really getting along. And he's trying
Would
to,
this be in 1976?
well, let's see. I graduated in 76, so this would have been probably, I would say it was probably sometime in 77.
Okay.
76. Yeah, because I took the bar in the summer, but I'd already been a lawyer for a year. 70, I think it's 77. So I go up there
Okay.
and, oh, I talked to Dave Arneson before that. I say, well, TSR is located in Lake Geneva.
Hmm.
And I do a little research on Wisconsin corporation law. Well, Dave, you're a shareholder. So when you come down, we'll get together, bring your stock certificate, and we'll go to TSR's offices. And under the Wisconsin corporation law, any shareholder has the right to see the books and records of the corporation.
Yes.
So, okay, so fine, we do that. And so, okay, well, let's go this afternoon. Well, as later was pointed out to me, Gygax and all of his people are at the Playboy Club
Hmm.
with the game going on.
Oh, yes. An actually disastrous Gen Con. Could have killed the company.
Yeah, and so uh, I know nothing about all of this, right? But I said,
Hmm.
okay, Dave, well, let's go drive down to TSR's, which is it's not in his garage anymore. It's now in
It's a house.
it's someplace. But there, so we go there, and there's a nice young lady there, and so I say, oh, this is Mr. Arnson. He's shareholder. Here's his stock certificate. We'd like to see the books and records of the company. And frankly, I'm thinking, well, she's going to say, well, Mr. Gygax is here, and I can't do come back later. To my shock, she says, oh, okay, well, here, follow me. And she takes us in the back, and there's this big room, not that big, maybe this size or smaller,
Okay.
probably. And said, well, here's all the records and files. Here's the Xerox machine. Have at it.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. So we're frantically making copies of all sorts of stuff that
Yeah.
is helping Dave. And then the real trouble starts between them. And I'm initially helping Dave. But I got to the point of saying, Dave, you're gonna have to file a lawsuit to
Hmm.
vindicate your rights because they fired him.
Right.
And as I pointed out, you'd never want to be a minority shareholder in a closely held corporation because you lose every vote 51 to 49. And
Hmm.
being a shareholder does not guarantee you a dividend,
Yeah,
does not guarantee you a job. And so they don't pay any dividends, even if they're making money, they put it all back into the company.
because the guys running the company are also the fellows who control the stockholders
Exactly.
meetings. Yeah.
Right. So I said, you've been, in my opinion, defrauded. Uh, but I'm in Chicago. You need to get a lawyer either in, oh, and by this point, I knew that Gygax had hired the number one firm in Wisconsin
Hmm.
in Madison and not in, right, in Milwaukee to be his lawyer. And so I said, you can't you need a good lawyer.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, I will help you as best I can, but really you need to get either a Minnesota or a Wisconsin lawyer. And so he did that, and the rest is a long history.
Yeah, some of those documents have wound up online, and one of the ones that I was going through was the judge and then the relevant lawyers talking about how drawn out and basically how silly the process had been because they hadn't been able to actually do a court date and
Right. It just took
wrap things
forever.
up. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the law's delay and Foley and Lardner, who were the firm representing Gygax, were very good. And plus, there's all sorts of other stuff going on.
Yeah,
And so often in those cases, well, you're supposed to take, Mr. Gygax's deposition. Yeah, but he canceled and we haven't rescheduled it.
hmm.
All right, come back in 6 months and we'll have another status report. And so it does
Goes
not
on
take
and on.
long, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And at that point, as an aside, same thing happened in the federal courts everywhere, but in Chicago also because of the statute, the speedy trial statute,
Hmm.
drug cases had to be brought to trial within 90 days unless the defense wanted a postponement or the charges got dismissed. And the result is that the federal district judges have to, and because the defense bar catches on, the
Hmm.
government can't possibly be ready in 90 days.
Yeah.
So even though normally you'd want to delay, you answer ready for trial on the first day. And now they've got 3 months to put their case together, and mostly they can't.
Yeah.
And the judges are so backed up. So the judges are spending all their time on these criminal cases. They have no time for civil cases,
Mhm.
especially if they're just diversity. It's not a big civil rights case. So
Yeah.
this is a diversity case. It's just
Right.
residents
There's
of
this
different states.
newfangled gaming thing
Well,
also.
right. So, and of course, this is also during the period of time when the national publicity about Dungeons and Dragons itself is all negative.
Yeah.
Oh my God, so and so, he's disappeared. We couldn't find him, and he was down in a garage in Detroit
Yeah, the
pretending
Angry
he was.
Kid. Hmm.
Yeah, it was all really bad publicity. Uh,
Yeah.
but anyway, so this case goes on and on and on, and eventually does finally start making progress. And then the judge is trying to get the case to settle. Gygax by this time is out of California. Then things don't go so well for him. And anyway, so I'm completely absent from all of this. And then, how did I reconnect with Dave? Uh, I mean, I still continue to see him. He came down when I got married.
Yeah. If you're just in Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, and oh well, I think there were gaming conventions in Rockford,
Hmm.
and I would go there and we'd see each other occasionally. Uh, but probably wasn't until where was I when we did? Well, anyway, many years passed without my being
Hmm.
participating.
So
But
this
then
would
I
be
went
after
up
they
there
settled the
and
case.
yeah, well, then I got, the guys that made the movie,
Hmm.
uh, about Dave Arneson and Blackmoor,
Yeah, the Blackmore documentary. Yeah.
right. So somehow they got my name from Dave,
Hmm.
and Ed ended up being interviewed, extensively in the movie, talking about and of course, the focus started as one thing and ended more as a focus on the origin of the role-playing games.
Yeah.
And so on that, I knew more than because I had not really played. I mean, one of the things that I say in the movie is I've never actually played uh, Dungeons and Dragons
Sure.
because I I like the realistic recreations, and
Hmm.
I wasn't as much into all of this thing about how my character did this. Although they did name a character after me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's somebody, I think there's a character there that's a Peshwa or something like that.
Hmm.
And that was because when we did the Indian version of the Napoleonic campaign, uh, I was the Peshwa Puna, who was the principal Indian uh, well, you had the Mughal Empire, but the Mughal Empire at that point, which was all Muslim, was essentially, a structure with no substance to it.
Hmm.
And all of the Brahmins and so forth were the really running things was the Peshwa. So the Peshwa was a title from the Mughal emperor that meant like Pasha, he was like the prime minister,
Hmm. Hmm.
but really he was an independent prince and the most powerful within the Maratha Empire. So they started calling me the Peshwa,
Yeah.
and I was,
Can I ask a question about Napoleonics real
yes.
quick? Um, is it the time period that is so appealing because there's all kinds of neat things you can play out? Um, or does the rule set lend itself very well to playing a game
Well,
like that?
the what started with that is that Dave, when he was in college,
Hmm.
came across Totten's rules, wargaming rules from the 1890s that were used at West Point,
Yeah, Strategos.
and yeah, Strategos, and of course you really couldn't use those. I mean, they were good for that period of time,
Yeah.
but not so good, obviously.
Yeah, I tried to
So
read them. I got cross-eyed myself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, but they're way too complicated.
Yeah.
And so Dave started doing a series of rules. He started with Valley Forge,
Hmm.
graduated to Strategos and new fire tables. He was Army Ordnance,
Hmm.
so it's kind of his thing anyway. And so I guess, well, what appealed to those of us that had liked but ultimately rejected a lot of the board game or even some of the early computer games is the ability of the way with the referee. And the introduction of the concept of a referee is probably what revolutionizing uh, virtually all of the role-playing games for Napoleonic
Yeah.
too. And that was sort of my point in the interviews, is that now at one stroke you introduced the most important missing factor in doing a historical recreation, which is the fog of war.
Yeah.
When you look at the major battles that were fought almost since the beginning of recorded history, the sides weren't necessarily equal, but somebody thought that they had it in most cases. A few
Hmm.
cases, you're being chased and you're cornered, you have no choice but to fight.
Yes.
But generally speaking, somebody thought my troops on this day, under these circumstances, we can win. And that's why you had a battle.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you wouldn't fight. But Avalon Hill tried to do that with Bismarck, Chase of the Bismarck. But what they had is they had the board of the Atlantic, and then they had a
Hmm.
piece of cardboard that stood on end that puts in the middle, so you couldn't
Okay.
theoretically. All right, well, that didn't really work very well. The cardboard fell over, and
Yeah.
so forth, so on. Uh, but uh, one of the things that we tried to do with our own board game set of rules is try to figure out how to play them without the other side sitting there
Hmm.
watching what's going on. And people had to write orders. We didn't have the technology to do that, which eventually developed. But with the advent of the referee, then you could create the circumstances where people really didn't know.
Hmm.
Now, you still had the benefit if you did your homework. You would say, you know what? I think maybe Pickett's charge is not a good idea.
Hmm.
Maybe Longstreet's got an idea that, maybe that was a good
Yeah. Yeah.
idea. but you could theoretically do that, right? And see what happened. Uh, so I thought that got me back sort of interested and very
Hmm.
interested in the documentary that they were doing uh,
Stupid computer.
uh, about the origin of the role-playing games.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they actually turned the focus to that more than a, blow by blow account of a Dungeons and Dragons game, because really, virtually all of the games now, I think, owe their popularity and their playability to the concept of having a referee who can interpret the rules.
Hmm.
And, I mean,
And keep play going so
right.
you're
And
not
yes,
arguing.
yes, right.
Yes.
Well, that was another key
Uh-huh.
point. Now, I had not participated at that point, but the early accounts are that everybody spent all their time arguing about the
Hmm.
rules.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have one person to say, this is it,
Hmm.
you know, or no, he really didn't move too fast,
Hmm.
things got better. And
Yeah.
so,
I fulfill that role for my Warhammer Fantasy group,
mhm,
where even if I'm playing a game, I'll get rules questions just
yeah,
to very quickly shuffle through some stuff or look up a rule just to keep everybody going. So
yeah.
it's very useful.
And in order to do that successfully, not only do you need to know the rules, you need to be able to explain them
Hmm.
quickly to people who either don't know you but if they know you by reputation, again, with with Wesely, uh, and even with Arneson, I'd say even with, because Arneson could be very partisan when he was taking a
Hmm.
side. Uh, but a lot of his early creativity in, for example, Brownstein is what made Brownstein into, if you've read Dave Wesley's accounts of the early Brownstein game, he thought it was a failure.
Yes.
He goes, well, nobody really won, and everybody's, oh, we love it, let's do it again. And and so and Dave is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met, and knowledgeable, thinks through things that didn't occur to anybody else,
Hmm.
and able to then play off of that to make things better. Even now, the Brownstein games, uh, the one of the ways we reconnected is when they were in Rockford, uh, and my son at that point, I remember my son had done some reading, and he starts mentioning all these names. I said, "Well, I know these people.
Yeah.
Dave Wesley,
Mm.
yeah, I know him." I said, "Well," and they talk about it like these are the gods of bygone days. So, well, I know them. Let's go see him. So we did, and actually he came up with me when they were filming the movie.
Hmm.
And and one of the things in the movie is we did a recreation of a Napoleonic battle, if a completely fictitious one.
Yeah.
But uh,
The butcher paper out,
yeah,
massive
yeah,
battle.
well, yeah, they designed a battlefield, and again, we had just all of we had Rockford, we had McGarry, had we had Dave, Wesley. I mean, Arneson had died by this point.
Hmm.
Bill Hoyt, a lot of the younger guys who had sort of latched onto this, because they were having regular weekly sessions up there. I mean, they
Hmm.
would get together at Dave Wesley's giant library and play whatever game came into their mind. Uh, and but I was just flabbergasted. And once again, this last summer, we went up to Arnicon,
Hmm.
and we're at the hotel, and I'm feeling old and not moving around real well, but I'm moving around. And so we go to have lunch at a pub, which is right at the other end of the big parking lot. And so the nice waitress is like, "So, are you from around here?" "No." "What are you doing?" "Oh, we're at a convention across the
Hmm.
parking lot." "Oh, what are they doing?" "Dungeons and Dragons." And, "Oh, I play that all the time." And it just remains flabbergasting to
Hmm.
me. I mean, they came out with the movie. I mean, not the big Hollywood movie,
Right. Yeah.
right? And they go into the bookstore and there's the Dungeons and Dragons cocktail book with,
Yeah.
and I just as one who was there when Dungeons and Dragons was, Dave Arneson with a scribble pad, it's just astonishing how that has happened. And, we went up, not to play, but Dave Wesley was down for, uh, 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 Gary Con,
Hmm.
and my wife and I drove up because we're only about an hour from Lake Geneva, Illinois. We drove up, and again, I mean, there are like thousands of people there.
Yeah, I've been told it's pretty big now.
Yeah, well, it was, I mean, almost too big. But it's just when I think back to the early days, and so many of them are still around. And well, that was the other thing that astounded me when I went up to Arnicon. Is there all these people coming? You're Ken Shepro. Well, yeah, we have Dave. I guess the story of it passed into legend of
Mm.
our foray to Gygax's offices and
Yeah.
making off with the records, which I had no idea. But
It sounds like a good heist, to be frank.
yeah,
But then, it's perfectly
was
legal
all
and
legal,
lets you
right?
in.
It's
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
yeah, and as I say, we could find a lot of stuff that proved useful later,
Yeah.
and so, but it was just can I have your picture? You be in my picture, and it's just very sort of, and it's funny, and again
Hmm.
because as I said in the other movie, I never played Dungeons and Dragons. The first time I ever played was when they had an anniversary turn. Oh, the other thing is that later on, when the filmmakers were trying to get rights, uh, Dave's daughter needed a lawyer.
Hmm.
And so they suggested, well, you could hire Shepro and we'll pay his legal fee. So I
Oh,
got
wow.
that was what really brought me back into the group
Hmm.
is with the new generation. So I worked with her and we negotiated, the license agreement and
Hmm.
all that stuff, and also chased down people that had things that had belonged to Dave's estate. Somebody bought a whole bunch of stuff from a storage locker
Hmm.
that he had never paid the rent on. And so that was again turned out to be like a 2 year, not constantly, but I mean a lot of stuff involved. When Dave died, things were pretty entangled.
Hmm.
And so that was my reintroduction to so many of what I would call the patriarchs. And then at some place along the line, I got intrigued with the Battle of Bladensburg and said, "Oh, I think see if I can design a game." And so that's what I did. I had was fascinated by the battle because one, it was small scale, which means
There
that
you
you could
go.
actually play it. You didn't need 100,000 troops
Mm.
and gymnasium to play it. And uh, despite its one-sidedness, it appeared to be a game in which you could plausibly say both sides, depending on how good they are, could theoretically win. And
There
of
you go.
course,
You actually have win conditions.
yeah. Well, I mean, the the in theory, the win condition is the British mission is to go take Washington,
Hmm.
right? And your mission is to keep them from doing it. But there are also different variants, and in theory, you, the start time of this game is important. Wesley and I argued for about an hour last night about
Yeah,
what point in the battle are we going to start the game because
I got a map here.
well, yeah. So tomorrow I've got a big blow up at this. It's upstairs. So this is
Just up here.
well,
Maybe we can actually
here's
see it a little bit.
here's the
There you
actual original. So okay, so that's pretty accurate. So that basically is the Chesapeake campaign of 1814.
go. Hmm.
So there's uh, I got a copy for you too if you want.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um, so right there it is. Okay.
Fantastic.
So, So here's Washington, and you stop me when I'm getting too deep in the weeds. Here's Washington City.
Hmm.
All right, here is the, all right, well, back up. So in England, of course, the Americans declared war in June of 1812,
Right.
thinking the British are busy with Napoleon
Hmm.
and they're pissed off and they think this is going to be a great thing. The Warhawks, led by Henry Clay, who's the new Speaker of the House from Kentucky, the turnover in that Congress was the largest it's ever been because the 1810 Congress had raised their pay.
Hmm.
And the public was so outraged that something like 85% of the congressmen didn't even run for reelection.
Hmm.
You got brand new Congress. Um, and the Warhawks, which is the branch of the Republican Party, which has been in power ever since Jefferson beat Adams
Hmm.
and getting stronger and stronger. The Federalists are concentrated mostly in New England, and they're getting weaker and weaker.
Yeah.
So they win overwhelmingly. Madison is elected president, and uh, America is already feeling humiliated because the British are fighting Napoleon. They're very short of men, and of course, they're impressing American. But they're really not impressing Americans. They're impressing British deserters because if the British, every time somebody has a chance, the Americans pay better, the conditions are better, the
Yeah.
discipline isn't as bad.
You get a Bill of Rights.
Yeah, well, they don't know about that, but they said this. So in fact, many of the American merchant ships are crewed in not entirely by Brits, but by many people who are in. So the British think, well, just like we're in the Gulf right now, right? No,
Hmm.
we're number one. We can stop your ship and board it, and
Right. Yeah.
and if we find that you've got our people, now, of course, some people they weren't just kind of like trying to round up the illegals here in the Twin Cities, right?
Hmm.
Where are your papers? Well, I don't have papers. Well, you look like you would have been one of our people, so we're
Hmm.
taking you anyway. Uh, but Jefferson had no navy. He's got these gunboats, and there's the one episode with the Chesapeake fighting the Shannon, and the Shannon, that was a don't give up the ship, Captain Lawrence, who dies, and the ship gets taken. But America's not feeling very strong. But now the British are tied up with Napoleon. This is our chance, and we still want to get Canada.
Hmm.
So this would be perfect time to declare war. And of course, um, as we find out much later, the orders in council, which issued by the Privy Council in England, which allowed and directed the British Navy to basically stop ships and take people off, that was a big bone of contention. They finally decide, yeah, we're getting bad publicity and the Americans are trying an embargo, and we need their stuff,
Hmm.
so we'll repeal the orders of council. Well, of course, we didn't know about that till after Congress had declared war. And by that point, it was kind of too late to say, oops, never mind.
Yeah.
And so the war proceeds. And of course, in 1812, Napoleon is at the height of his powers and he decides to invade Russia. But in the meantime, the British fleet is being stretched thinner and thinner and thinner, and they don't really have much available to send to America, so they don't send very much. But by 1814, well, the first thing that goes wrong for the Americans, so the invasion of Canada is basically a disaster. But we do manage to capture York, which is the Toronto, capital of British North America, and we burn it to the ground. Take that.
Lovely.
Yeah, lovely, right? But the rest of the invasion kind of falls apart. The British have captured Detroit, but the British do not do so well on the Great Lakes. And so they lose the Battle of Lake Erie, they lose the Battle of Lake Ontario and Champlain. Uh, and so their invasion from the north is not going so well either. But again, they're fighting it with leftovers because I mean they can't afford to send good troops or
Hmm.
good commanders here because they're needed in Spain where they're fighting the French or elsewhere. But in 1814, after the Russian invasion collapses, Napoleon finally abdicates and is sent off to Elba. Well, now the British are at the height of they got the largest army they've ever had, the largest navy they've ever had,
Veterans now.
veterans. And yeah, I mean, when you look at the regiments in the American Revolution, like the ones that were at Bunker Hill, so
Yeah.
they never fought a battle. That was the first battle they ever fought. The British hadn't fought a battle since 1759, except for maybe a few Indians. So, this is 16 years later. I mean, they're British regulars and they've been
Hmm.
trained, but they haven't fought a real battle. So now Duke of Wellington has vanquished Napoleon in Spain. He's the hero of the day. He's now the go-to guy at the War Office. Uh, well, Duke, now that the war's over, how would you like to come and take command in the Americas? Because we're not doing so well.
Hmm.
Gets out the map, he looks at it, and he says immediately, unless you can get naval superiority on the Great Lakes, I'm not interested. And you're not going to be able to do that, so I'm not interested.
Hmm.
So he turns it down. But he says, but what you need a more aggressive strategy. Because at this point, nobody's talking about reconquering America, but they want to teach us a lesson because we've made their life miserable
Yeah.
and it's pretty annoying. And the few times there have been successes, they get way too much play in the British press. It's kind of like, the current administration attacking CNN because they're not reading the press releases, they're
Hmm.
focusing on other stuff, right? So Lord Bathurst, who was the Secretary of State for War, and Viscount Melville is the first lord to say, we need we need a better strategy to deal with America. Now, there are negotiations going on. There's a peace process going on in Belgium where they're trying to make a deal, but they're not getting very far. The British already say, well, we already gave up on impressment of seamen. So
Hmm.
why are we fighting? And the Americans, well, right now you're in Detroit, you're in Fort Chicago, Fort Dearborn, you're here. I mean, well, I say, well, yeah, you started the war, and so they're getting really nowhere. But so British, okay, well, we got to break the land jam. So where are we gonna do? We still don't really want to spend the money. Well, that's the other thing. We've been spending. We are so far in debt from 20 years of fighting Napoleon.
Hmm.
Yeah, we got the forces, but it costs money. And so what should we do? Well, they look at the coastline. There's too much coastline to interdict the whole American coast. But they said, you know what? Chesapeake. Chesapeake is the place because Baltimore is the largest port. That's where most of the anti-British shipping is coming out of. And so, and plus it's easily accessible to our fleet. So what we'll do is we'll do a series of coastal raids, and that the American we'll land, we'll go hold up the town for ransom and burn this military supplies, and eventually the Americans are going to realize they can't stop us, and we'll make a deal.
Right, because you don't know where they're going to strike next.
Right. So all through 1813 and 1814, this is going on, but with indifferent success. And part of the problem is that Admiral Warren, the British commander, is very cautious and not big on taking chances. And there's no really good land commander uh, with the troops. But now the Napoleonic War's over, okay, now we can get serious.
Hmm.
And now we've got Wellington's victorious army of seasoned troops that will, beat the best of the French has to offer. Let's send a few of them over. We don't have to send all of them. Let's just send 3 or 4 regiments and some experienced commanders who have a little bit more aggressiveness built into them. And now we'll see how that works out. And so in the summer of 1814, uh, four regiments of Wellington's Peninsular veterans are put on ships and sent over, first to the Caribbean and then up to uh, the Americas, where the British have managed to grab any convenient offshore island and turn that into a military base.
Mhm.
And from that, and Admiral Warren is fired, and they hire Admiral Cochrane, uh, who's considered to be a bulldog, to be the new station commander. And so now they've got a plan, and they're going to continue it, which is we're just going to intensify our attacks in the coastal areas. And so that's what happened. The new regiments are assigned, and there's a series of amphibious raids up and down the Maryland coastline,
Mhm.
basically taking pretty much everything they want and then getting back on their ships and sailing away. But a couple of things that happen. Uh, Admiral Cochrane decides that it might be a good plan to enlist black Africans
Mhm.
to run away from their masters and join the British Army. So he issues this proclamation that basically says anybody who comes and joins us, we guarantee, uh, you'll when we leave, we'll take you with us and
Mhm.
resettle you and your family. Unlike the feeble efforts during the American Revolution,
Yeah.
where they enlisted some black regiments, and then it would have been for Sir Guy Carleton, who had succeeded Sir Henry Clinton after the war was effectively over. He made sure that the remaining uh, black regiments were evacuated as opposed to being left to be recaptured and reintroduced
Mhm.
to slavery. So he raises about 300 or 400 of these guys who are runaway slaves. And they're not particularly effective, but they're given uniforms and they're trained. But that further outrages the Americans, is that because
How
they're,
dare you?
well, they live in, they, especially in the southern colonies, they are in constant fear of a slave uprising.
Right.
And, by then you've already had Nat Turner and you've got what happened during the Revolution. And so they are not so happy about that. But, and they're still trying to take Canada. So, but now you've got Admiral Cochrane. He's got a plan to ratchet up the pressure and starts doing more of these coastal raids.
Mhm.
And by July, the reinforcements that he've asked for have arrived, including a new commander, Robert Ross, Major General Robert Ross, who is one of the rare commanders that Wellington ever actually complimented. Usually it's like these guys are all idiots and I'm smart. But he had great admiration for General Ross and actually recommended him to the War Office to be the new commander in North America,
Mhm.
which jumped him over a lot of people that were higher up on the seniority roster. But he liked the fact that he thought the way Wellington did was big on discipline, but he also led from the front,
Mhm.
and so he's the guy. And now he's there with four basically experienced regiments of British regulars. Uh, and what are we to do with them? So Cochrane's second in command, Admiral Coburn, Rear Admiral Coburn, has a grudge against the Americans because he had a brother who was killed in a battle with the Americans during the Revolution. And so he can't, and he is also very, very well informed. He got spies everywhere in the Virginia countryside between there and Washington. So he has a really pretty phenomenal knowledge in a day when you were lucky to get a map of all the local conditions. And plus he's got a cause, which is avenge his brother. So jointly, they come up with a plan. They're going to land, in this case, they land at, now, in the
Yeah.
meantime, the the other reason that they like this area is that most of what's left of the American Navy is holed up in Baltimore. And they've got all these old gunboats, which are coming out. They're kind of like these little speedboats that the Iranians have now.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, individually, they're like you smash them with one shot, they sink. But there's so many of them, they can overwhelm you. And so they want to put a stop to that because a lot of the coastal bases are being used by the American little tiny gunboats. And Commodore Barney, who is one of the regular naval officers, got a whole fleet of gunboats. And gradually the British get their smaller ships and they chase the Americans further and further upriver. And finally, they corner him in a place where it's too shallow. They can't go any further up north. They can't get away. What are they going to do? They end up all going to burn them. And then you have to stand by. If the British get too close, just burn the ships.
Hmm.
But they salvaged many of the big guns off of the ships, including key 18-pounder and 12-pounder long naval guns. And when Barney's fleet is sunk by his own orders, he then mobilizes his Marines and a few seamen to drag the heavy artillery. And basically, well, we're going to go continue to fight on land, which he does. Uh, so when the new regiments arrived, they start immediately being deployed on these raids leading up to the Grand Raid, which is set for August of 1814. And British prepare, both sides prepare at this point, pretty well established. The Americans know now they're not really computing it right. They say, well, this is where they've been doing this, they'll probably continue to do it,
Right.
or go for Baltimore. And the British are, okay, now we have a plan finally, and we've got two commanders who are gung ho to execute it, as opposed to just worrying about not losing. So they're all set to go. And on the 20th of August, the British are up here. They've been doing forced marches ever since they landed.
Hmm.
And it's in the high 90s, we would say. And they would just say it's very hot. And it's incredibly humid. If you've ever been in Washington D. or Maryland in the summer, where
I have not,
I
luckily.
spent 2 years. Well, it's the until the early 20th century, the official uniform for a British diplomat in Washington D.C. were khaki shorts and a pith helmet because it was classified as a hardship tropical post. So whatever you would wear, you're in India or
Hmm.
well, that was this prescribed uniform for North America because it was such an inhospitable climate. But anyway, so um, the British have landed, and now the question is, what are you going to do about it? And there is essentially mass panic and dissension in Washington. First off, it dawns on them, but we have no troops. They're all elsewhere. We have no troops in the area to speak of, except there's a few militia units.
Hmm.
Uh, we have a few professional artillerists, but they're holed up in the coastal forts, looking to strike guns that come in range. So uh, we reach out to anybody we can find in Maryland, District of Columbia, and Virginia, and say, send help, send your state militia or whatever. And so they're all starting to converge on, and it doesn't take a genius to discover after a couple of days of monitoring the British march that they are not going to Baltimore, they're going to Washington.
Hmm.
In Washington, they take it to the Secretary of War, who's about to quit, because he's John Armstrong. And Armstrong says, don't worry, because they're not going to attack Washington because it has no strategic importance. Um, and I think they'll go for Baltimore.
Hmm.
Mr. Spam, my favorite dog. Uh, so, of course, as a historian says,
Oh,
he was half right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's
time to
in
go.
here. Yeah,
Hit the red button.
yeah. Um, so Armstrong says, well, we don't really need to worry because they're probably going to go to Baltimore
Yeah.
and we'll focus on that. Well, again, he turns out to be half right. Baltimore is an objective, but not this objective for this mission. Washington is.
Hmm.
And so here the British have marched in a direction, they land down here, St. Benedict. They march up here. Then they get to, I think it's at Nottingham. Oh, up on Marlborough. So they, up at Marlborough, they're there like on the 23rd, 22nd of August. And by now, it's Ross's orders are clearly to march to Washington and carry off as much destroy as much of the military value. There's a Washington Navy Yard, which is
Hmm.
important, but it has a powder magazine, but not a big one. So it's not a huge, great military target, but they figure, well, it's just easy. It's slim pick, we can pick it off easily. And sure enough, the Americans are in complete disarray. There is no army really designated to be the point of defense.
Hmm.
Uh, in July, Madison is talked into organizing a 10th military district for American operations. It had been part of the ninth. So now it's its own district. It's the smallest of all of them, geographically and in population. It's about,
Hmm.
well, I'm trying to think. Uh, anyway, it's
Relatively small.
not big. So now what do we do? They have a big meeting at the president's house, and including the attorney general, the president, the vice president, and the secretary, the war secretary of the Navy, and a few other people that wander into the meeting. And well, what do we do? Well, we've got a garrison at Fort Washington, which is about 50 miles south of Washington, D.C. Uh, and they need to stay there because they're guarding the strait against the British coming up river and shelling our city. So we don't want to lose. Well, what else have you got? Well, we got a couple of battalions of troops that are training for the capital. They're going to get their new guns, their new cannon, their, their new guns.
Yeah.
And then there's the militia. Okay, well, so now he forms a new military district to basically oversee operations in this area. And he appoints William Winder, who is a serving brigadier general in the American Army. Uh, but he appoints him because the governor of Virginia is General Winder's uncle, and he's trying to curry favor with the Federalists. One of the things that happened is that, backing up, is that the Federalist Party had made a big comeback in the 1812 elections on the strength of being anti-war, and Monroe is pro-war. And I think the Federalists won everything in New England. The Democrats won everything else. So they again won. Somebody won. Oh, uh,
Hmm.
but uh, Madison's trying to curry favor with the Federalist governor of Virginia, and he makes a deal that I'll point your nephew and you won't make trouble. And
Yeah.
good deal. So they do that. But now they hear the British is on the march. Now it's in the 90s. It's very humid. Ross's men, even though they're experienced, Spain it's dry heat. Here it's
Hmm.
humidity. So a lot of them are dropping on the side of the road. But he keeps going, and on August 20th, which is probably going to end up being the beginning date,
Yeah.
they are approaching the Bladensburg Bridge. Yeah,
And
decide
now,
what
is
to
that going to be
do.
the start for your
This
guys'
is
war
probably
game?
going to be the start, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
there's some decisions that are being
yeah,
made. At least
yeah,
it'll be
because
the start point for the British team.
yeah, we can explain that real quick.
So that
So
takes
actually,
us.
here at DaveCon, they're going to be actually fighting a battle over
Yeah.
Washington D.C. to see if
Well, so now this goes to the inset.
oh yeah.
Again, I've got this, this, this is blown up to cover
Mm-hmm.
most of the table.
Yeah.
And that's just this portion which sort of fits in here at, at Bladensburg.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to go to Washington, there's only really one way to get there from where
Mm-hmm.
they are, and that's the bridge over the Potomac at Bladensburg.
Yeah.
So Ross's troops are pretty clearly marching. Now, just to make sure, right now at the well, I call it the White House, the president's house, not
Mm-hmm.
White yet. The president's house, you got the president, you got Dolly Madison who's sitting in, you've got the attorney general, you've got General Winder. General Winder, as they say, has been appointed. He has really no military experience, but his uncle is a Federalist governor, and Madison
Oh.
is badly in need of some bipartisan support
Mm-hmm.
for his war, which is going badly. And the governor of Maryland is a Federalist, so Winder is appointed. Uh, and the Navy Secretary is there, Armstrong is there, and the Secretary of State, Monroe, is there. What do we do? Well, does anybody know what's going on? Well, we think they're here. So Monroe says, "Well, don't you have scouts out?" No, we didn't really. So he says to Armstrong, "Give me 300 of your troopers, and I will make a personal reconnaissance." Okay, fine. Be at the gate at 2 hours. So Monroe shows up. He's ready to go, and Armstrong sends him like 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, undaunted, Monroe sets out with his 5-person escort, and he rides all over this area up here. And he finally finds the British on a forced march crossing that river, and their next stop is going to be here if they have to stop.
Yeah.
And so he sends back a detailed written report back to the president and Secretary of War. Here's what I did, here's what I found, here's what happened. And then he gets to the very end, kind Monroe, Colonel Monroe, he's an honorary colonel at this point,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and said, "Oh, wait a minute," and he adds a postscript. Okay, the postscript says, "P.S. You had better remove the records." And that really sets off a panic because the records of the government are not in one spot. Each office in whatever building it happens to be in, which is all over the place, has their own records.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only a limited number of wagon drivers and people that are willing to help them load up the records and haul them away. The last group is actually one of the better trained detachments, and they get their stuff packed up and ready to go about 10 minutes before the actual battle starts. They're there to fight the battle because
Mm-hmm.
they did it, but
Yeah. Which you guys are going to decide the dispositions and everything.
well, so yeah, well, we know the actual dispositions, but we're going to let everybody decide what they want to do.
Okay.
And so that will graduate to the enlarged version of this.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, if we had more time, there are some scenarios under which the Americans, being better organized and a little more alert, might decide, wait, let's stand up here.
Oh,
I'm
sure.
tired of sitting down after a while. So they could decide, instead of waiting for them to get to the bridge at Bladensburg, let's move out into the countryside.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they do know about the British is they have no cavalry. The only horses they have are horses that they have either bought or generally stolen
Right.
from surrounding farms. They only have 3 cannon, two 6-pounders and a 3-pounder, which is
Mm-hmm.
really nothing.
Yeah.
And they have no caissons or gun carriages, so they're all being dragged by seamen from the ships. Uh, so they're not very mobile, but they do have a rocket detachment of
Mm-hmm.
concrete rockets. The Americans really don't understand much about them at this point because they're fairly new. They've only been introduced in 1808 There's a few examples that are being used in Canada, but they don't really pay much attention to that. So an aggressive American, better organized, might say, well, let's put some troops out here in the countryside and slow them down, and maybe we'll get them to turn back.
Hmm.
Because generally, the British have been cautious. They don't want to, these are coastal raids. They're not designed to hold territory, but to spread terror and raise, oh, a couple of towns, I think Nottingham, that paid $20,000 to not be burnt down.
Good old fashioned shakedown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Hmm.
quite good. It was
Hmm.
definitely a shakedown. Uh, but by now, the British are already at Upper Marlborough, and Ross is very well. So they're sitting there, and Admiral Cochrane, who's in his big flagship way out in Chesapeake Bay,
Hmm.
is getting nervous that he doesn't want to start out getting these new troops here, getting them so far away from the ships that something bad happens and they can't get back. So he sends a written order to Ross and Coburn saying, turn around, come back. You've gone far enough. And um, so you get the order, and Ross says, well, I guess we're going to turn back. And Coburn says, what's the matter with you? You know, you're a
We're
gutless.
so
Yeah,
close.
we're so close. He said, believe me, I know this countryside. You know, these people, they don't, they're stupid. They can't fight. You know, let's push on.
Hmm.
And Ross gets talked into it. Okay, we'll go for it. So now it's 95 degrees. They don't have good thermometers, but it's 95 degrees, incredibly humid. But he decides he's going to force march his troops.
These guys
So,
got to be beyond exhausted at this
well,
stage.
they are right. Well, they've spent the night at Upper Marlborough,
Hmm.
but they had a forced march all the way from down here. So they're recovering. So, but now we're going to do another forced march. And so on the morning of the 24th, they start a forced march. Around 11 o'clock, they get to Oldfields. Oh, sorry, they're going. Okay, yeah, they get to Oldfields. And then they find out that the bridges over the Potomac have been destroyed down
Hmm.
here. So they rest for an hour. They let some of the stragglers catch up. Even these trained regiments are not used to heat like this. And they're full field packs. They have rations for 8 days that they're
Hmm.
carrying with them. So they decide they turn north. They're going to go to Bladensburg because that's the nearest bridge that they hear has not been destroyed. And also, there might be a chance that they could ford the river upstream. Clearly, they have no naval vessels to
Yeah.
get across the river here. So off they go. And now Monroe's raised the alarm. And so now there are various, they send word to Baltimore, Annapolis, um, send what you got and concentrate here. Meanwhile, the District of Columbia militia and some troops from Virginia are down here. They are ordered to march to Bladensburg and hold a position. Um, one of the units is a 900 Virginia militia, and they are at the armory, and they don't have any they don't have any firearms. And oh, we got firearms here,
Hmm.
Colonel. We just have a few forms to fill out.
It's
Just
got to be
you.
signed in trips kit. You got to have 3 copies.
Well, that yeah. Well, right. They don't have
Uh-huh.
carbon paper problem. Right. So fill all this out, and then we can issue your the muskets. Uh, they're old muskets, but
Uh-huh.
they work probably.
Sure.
And so actually, his unit never even gets into the battle because he's still sitting in Washington filling out paperwork. There's
Incredible.
another group that comes from a District of Columbia has no muskets, but they do have pikes.
Heights.
Pikes, yes. Yeah, okay. So there are also 3 detachments of U.S. Army regulars,
Hmm.
100 men each. Um, so far, the 38th regular army has just been raised, and even though they are regular army, they have never fought, and they have
Hmm.
not even been trained. They've even gone through basic training.
Very fresh.
The 36th Regiment has actually been involved in some of the coastal fights.
Yeah.
It actually killed a few British Marines, so they're feeling pretty confident.
Okay. Okay.
Um, there's no real cavalry there. There's about 100 dragoons, regular dragoons, and now there's also word that the Maryland militia will be coming from Annapolis and Baltimore. So they're all converging here. General Winder orders the troops in Washington to march to Bladensburg, and they march. They're strung out over about a 5 mile stretch. And they get halfway there, and he changes his mind. Oh, let's go back. So they turn around, they counter march back for a while. Nope, that's not a good idea either. So they end up,
Uh-huh.
and they do get finally to Bladensburg. And so here is Bladensburg.
Yeah.
So here's the town. Here is the bridge.
Yep.
And now the Americans, and then Winder makes a series of really bad decisions. Um, he puts a lot of troops up here on the heights,
Mm-hmm.
but they are out of range of the bridge. They can't, they
You
they
can't make
can
it
fight.
hard to
They
get to the
can't hit the
bridge, to
bridge. They can't
cross
hit the
it,
bridge, right?
or
He
the
also
conscripts
doesn't
underneath.
destroy the bridge,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good bridge. I mean, it wouldn't be easy. Now he's got a few. These are just scouts that are up on this hill.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been arguably a defensible hill. He could have also just, knowing they had to get through town, he could have
Mm-hmm.
just put his troops in all the houses, and the British would have to go house to house to clear a way to get to the bridge.
Yeah.
They didn't do that either. So instead, they are across the river deployed near the woods. The biggest concentration is right here. Uh, and so this is where the troops are when the presidential party arrives from Washington. Winder arrives ahead of some of the troops, but some of the militia from Maryland or from Baltimore is already there. They're in the field. So he comes around, you go here, etc. So they're in place. And so he goes back to find out what's happened to the rest of his column. And meanwhile, the Secretary of State, who was in the boat with Washington when he crossed the Delaware,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't have much of a James Monroe, didn't ever have a real command. But he fancies himself as a Revolutionary War veteran. He knows what he's doing. He's going to teach these guys. So he goes down and he starts talking to the regimental commanders and
Mm-hmm.
repositioning them. Yeah, I think you should be over here.
Yeah.
So he moves them around. Of course, Winder has no idea this is going on. And Winder doesn't have a great plan, but he does have an idea that maybe what I do is I get close enough that I can project fire onto the bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and the British aren't going to swim for it. Now, he doesn't occur to him that maybe the river is fordable upstream. When they could have sent a couple, 20 or 50 people there to guard
Right.
fords and at least let him know. But he didn't do that. So, but Russ basically gets nearby and he decides he's just going to go blow over the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually the battle, and Commodore Barney has burned his fleet of gunboats. So his people have nothing to do, but he manages to get 5 of his naval guns dragged into place and they're set up
Oh.
right here in a key spot on the
Mm-hmm.
road. Um,
Right.
and
Now, as we're going through some of this stuff, I know that there's going to be a game starting here soon.
I
So,
think tomorrow,
I'll
this game,
I'll go behind this.
here,
I
yeah,
think we
we'll have
have
to
some
probably
set for
clear
five
up.
o'clock.
Yeah. So anyway,
So, yeah, it's going to be.
this is the actual
Uh-huh.
view of the battlefield. So here are the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Here's Bladensburg. The British at this point are already across.
Yeah.
Barney's guns are set up right here in the middle of the road, blocking the road to Washington. And these are the militia that end up being routed and running away.
Hmm.
His people stand there and basically keep firing until even after the flanks collapse,
Oh
and
my.
they are overrun. Barney is wounded, and finally, at that point, seeing that everybody else has run away, they finally accept the British offer to surrender.
Yeah.
At which point, the British are, and I've left out a fact that the rocket detachment fires their rockets, and the
Yeah, it's even
Maryland,
depicted here.
yeah, the Maryland militia just run like hell. The
It's a new
rockets,
thing. Yeah.
the thing is, the, if they're really lucky, a rocket might hit somebody and kill them,
Hmm.
but otherwise they don't really do anything.
Hmm.
They might burn a town down, but they don't do anything against the troops in the field. However, the troops don't really get that. They run away,
Yeah.
right? And so that's the rocket's red glare.
And
But anyway, at this point, the British are contemptuous of most of the Americans, but they have great admiration for Commodore Barney. And actually, General Ross personally goes up, how are you doing? Are you all right? He immediately paroles him
hmm.
and says, but you need a doctor. He gets his personal physician
Hmm.
to come up and attend to Barney's wounds. And Barney eventually, of course,
Yeah.
survives as a great hero for his heroic stand, um, and his Marines with him. But everybody else is running back to Washington as fast as they can. And the British don't even really call this a battle. They call it the Bladensburg races
Hmm.
because they said it. They proved definitively that an American militiaman can run faster than a
Yeah.
British in full
Looks
field
like
gear.
Dave Wesley was
Yeah,
calling you now.
yeah. Hey there.
Hi there, either hello there, there's you and me.
Are you here?
I am, no, I am finally done with the doctor.
Okay. All right. Well,
Uh,
I'm upstairs. I'm been talking much too valuably to for an interview about you and me and everything. And
oh,
they're
no,
about to start a game in here in a little while. So I'm up in, I think they said this is like
It's like runway three.
runway 3
check
on the second floor.
We too.
Runway 2.
so I'll call it actually.
Just call you when you're actually here. Or just come up to the park your car and come up to the second floor.
When I try to obtain something to eat,
That might be a good idea. All right.
what would,
That might be a good idea. But
I am breakfastless at the moment.
okay.
So, but the doctors are open.
All right.
Okay, so I'll be, get down in front of the handicap park.
All right. It's like you're like the Russian peasants, right? The Russian peasants were penniless and the Tsar was Nicholas.
I'm
All right.
stealing that. I like
Okay.
that.
All right. I'll see you in a few. Bye. I can't
I guess you
take
actually
credit for that, but
have some food soon.
yeah. All right. Well, anyway, so at that point, uh, Ross's troops have taken some pretty heavy casualties getting
mhm.
across the river, but they don't really care because
Right,
I
they're
mean
making a drive
they
from Washington. The enemy's right
well,
there.
so now, okay, so now, well, now his troops are, I mean, they took a lot of casualties. They're still, like, Ross is still thinking about the fact that the admiral had told him to turn around and come back.
Hmm.
And this is the most casualties even though the Americans have all run away, these are the most casualties he's suffered. And he's a little nervous. And Coburn again, well, we are on the run.
Mm.
We can get into Washington in no time.
Yeah,
And and Ross is like, well, yeah, but there's nothing of military value there, really. Well, there's the Navy Yard, that's it. And they burned Toronto.
hmm.
Okay, fine. So they rest for an hour and they march, and they're 7 miles from Washington. Meanwhile, in Washington, there is complete panic now because all of the troops running away
Right.
are running through to get as far away as possible. Um, Madison has caught up in the mob of people retreating. His wife is at the president's house organizing people packing records.
Hmm.
And but all of the records are dispersed in different offices around town. There's no central repository,
Right.
and there is, oddly enough, a shortage of workers and drivers and horses and wagons
Mhm.
to get all these records. But somehow they get them packed up, and she waits till the very last. And when everything else is packed up, she takes the portrait of George Washington by Gilbert Stuart
Mhm.
and puts it in the wagon. And 7 minutes later, Ross's advance guard arrives at the president's house, which is conveniently set for dinner for the cabinet that has now fled in
Mhm.
all directions. And so Ross and his officers sit down, eat dinner, and then he orders the the Capitol building and the the president's house to be, well, Colbert says, burn them. It's
Mhm.
a, generally Ross's orders are do not destroy personal property, but it's okay to destroy public property.
Okay.
So, all right, this is public property, and Coburn says burn it, and so we'll burn it. So they start doing that. Oh well, there's the Navy Yard. Navy Yard isn't great, but there's a ship there, and there's lots of naval stores. Okay, let's go take out the destroy stores of the Navy Yard. So he sends troops to the Navy Yard who don't really know what they're doing. And inadvertently, they set up a enormous explosion,
Mhm.
which blows them and the Navy Yard to smithereens. The British have more dead and wounded from blowing up an undefended Navy Yard than they
Mhm.
suffered in the battle. Yeah, totally. And that burns most of the town down, which they
Mhm.
didn't intend to do.
Right.
Well, this was only planned to be a raid anyway.
Mhm.
So amidst all this devastation, um, just like, well, get everybody together because we're turning around and going back to the ships.
Yeah.
And that's it. 24 hours later, they're gone. They're on their way back to the ship.
Mhm.
And that's the end of the Battle of Bladensburg. Um, so the next plan is, well, this didn't work so well, but how about Baltimore?
And so they changed the
So
direction. Yeah.
well, that was always plan B anyway.
Mhm.
That's the next stage.
Yeah.
We're going to make this raid, and then we're going to go up and we're going to hit Baltimore because
Mhm.
that's where the real trouble is coming from. And Baltimore is a great military target,
Yeah.
and better than Washington, Admiral Cochrane can get his bomb vessels
Mhm.
and his bigger ships in closer to the port, unlike here where the Potomac's not wide enough. And
Yeah.
so,
I'll try to be in the room so I can at least
yeah,
observe as you
yeah,
guys are playing
right.
this, because we'll see if
And
everything
so,
goes
in the
differently then.
meantime, so, but on the possibility that the Battle of Bladensburg turned out differently,
Mhm. Let a contingency call?
well, no, let's see, where is this? This will be a good, oh. So Francis Scott Key, being in the battle and observes Barney's heroic stand, which turns back the British at the key moment, despite the rockets being fired at them,
Mhm.
writes a song about it.
Doesn't this look familiar? Yeah, got Star Spangled Banner here.
Well, it has slightly different words.
Mhm. The foe's haughty host with their bayonets gleaming. Yeah. Now,
Of course,
did
it
he
didn't happen.
just do the first stanza? Did he do the other ones at the same time?
He
I've got to
did.
look deeply into this
Oh,
because
okay. So,
I
well,
know the
all
fourth.
right. So now recent historical research suggests that given he was on the flagship,
Yes.
the admiral's flagship, which was an 80-gun ship, which had to stay far back because
Mhm.
it drew too much water or to go in with the bomb vessels. But he and a colleague had been dispatched to negotiate for the relief of a doctor that had been taken by the British in one of the coastal raids,
Mhm.
and ostensibly for helping the Americans, but really he was just ministering to the ill. And so their pitch was, look, he was tending to your wounded Marines too.
Yeah.
And so you should release him. And so basically Cochrane is, yeah, okay, I think, we're civilized people and I'm authorized to release him. However, we are about to start an assault on Fort McHenry,
Hmm.
so you're going to have to wait till after the battle. So, and then,
Right.
then
Yes.
we'll put you back ashore.
Hmm.
So he's watching the bombardment, supposedly. Recent history suggests that the reported position of the the flagship during the bombardment is that he could not possibly have seen the flag over the fort that he says he did.
Hmm.
But, you know, as it says in one of the John Wayne movies, when when uh, when history when history contradicts legend, print the legend.
Let's get
So
a great song out of it.
yeah, well anyway, so yeah, he watches the whole thing
Hmm.
and is inspired, and he goes back home and he writes a whole long poem of 5 stanzas,
Hmm.
which is then published and immediately becomes a big hit.
Right.
So yes, he wrote the oh say can you see, and then let's see, second stanza is let's see,
Can't say I know the second or the third. I know the fourth.
well let's see, you've got uh oh, I'm having a senior moment now. Let's see, I know the last, I know the fourth, I know the third and the second. On the shore dimly seen through the mist of the deep, where the foe's haughty host in dead silence reposes, etc., etc.
Hmm.
That's verse 2. Verse 3 is, oh, where's that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more. Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps' pollution. No refuge could save the hiring and slave from the depths of defeat of the gloom of the grave, and the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave. Now, recently, some of the more woke people around the country have said that shows that it was really a racist song. The reference to the hiring and slave was, they argue, was a reference to the Admiral's proclamation,
Hmm.
slaves run away from your masters,
Yeah.
and we will hire you and you can help defeat the people that enslaved you.
Hmm.
He was speaking metaphorically,
Yeah.
not, so that's garbage. But
People
anyway,
don't
and
get
then the
metaphors
last
anymore. Yeah.
stanza is, oh, thus be it ever.
Hmm.
Yeah,
When free men shall stand.
yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, Occasionally the last stanza is sung, almost never
Hmm.
2 and 3, interestingly enough. And, but yeah, so, and it was published and it became a great hit. At this time, the closest thing to the national anthem was what is now the is Hail Columbia,
Hmm. Yes.
which is now the vice president's official march and was the national anthem, sort of. We didn't really have one, but the Star Spangled Banner became the unofficial national anthem at the Olympic Games in Athens in 1896.
Wonderful.
Because the plan was is that when a country's team won an event, they would play their national anthem.
Sure.
Well, we didn't have one, but there was an American warship in the harbor. And so they went out there and they said, we got some music and a band to play.
Hmm.
And they had the sheet music for Star Spangled Banner. And so when we won events in Athens in 1896, they played the Star Spangled Banner, and that superseded all the other songs, and it did not officially, I think, become the national anthem until the 1930s.
I think it was a congressional vote.
Yeah,
Well, I'm going to steal a phrase here, and then we can say the rest is history, so we
The
can wrap it
rest
up
is
here.
history, right?
So thank you so much for
Yeah.
sitting and talking with
Or
me.
as Winston Churchill, yeah, the nice thing about history is it never ends.
Hmm.
The stuff that was happening in real time when I was 8 years old, now I'm told is still not covered in class because there's not enough time in the year anymore to
Hmm.
go much past about 1945.
Yeah, I've told some students I've actually had some history college courses about how, maybe now we could really start talking about the 80s if we're careful about some things because you need a long period of time in between.
Right. Well, and of course, yeah, and if we're still close enough to the actual events
Hmm.
that what are you going to teach about the Vietnam War without getting into a huge argument
Oh
about
yeah.
what is it we're going to teach about the Vietnam,
Hmm.
even the space program. But it was funny because I'm watching the space launch and they're talking to real astronauts. And the real astronauts are all much younger than I am. And oh, yeah, we read about Project Mercury. We thought that was really cool. You might be an astronaut. And I'm thinking, I was in school the day that John Glenn went up. And I
Hmm.
remember we showed up that first off, we watched all morning. They had continuous coverage. They, of course, ran out of things to say because there
Hmm.
was hold after hold. And I remember they found John Glenn's third grade teacher.
Hmm.
Well, what did you think about John Glenn? That was it. Or in the movie, which it really did happen though, is that with Alan Shepard, there was a truck that was delivering diapers with diaper service, and they went out and they attacked the diaper truck for it. Well, it wasn't
Hmm.
even for that house, but yeah, and it was just really funny, and all that stuff I remember, and all the lingo and the AOK, and of course there had been anything since the last moon mission,
Hmm.
but it just was really interesting. I remember when our first rocket blew up.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we thought the Russians were going to beat us because they're in space and we're not. So anyway, yeah, history never ends, and eventually they'll get around to interpreting it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, if the politicians paid more attention to history, they wouldn't repeat it. There's a famous quote, I think, Lord Acton: "History repeats itself. The first time is tragedy, the second time is farce." And then there's another version that says those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. And a third quote that says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme.
Hmm. I like the rhyming one
I
myself,
like that. I
actually.
like that
Yeah.
the one the
Hmm.
best. And sure enough, you can look at what's going on right now and you can find plenty of examples.
Hmm.
Even the thing about how can all these little speedboats interdict the tankers? So read about the capture of the USS Philadelphia during the wars with Tripoli.
Hmm.
We got this great big frigate, and all the pirates have hundreds of these little tiny boats.
Yep.
You know what?
Too many
We
targets.
can't we can't fire our 24 pounders fast enough or depress the guns low enough
Hmm.
to hit these things, which are swarming up on us and climbing over the side, and we're like the pitiful, helpless giant.
Yeah. Well, thanks for
So
talking with me.
thank
I'm
you
very
for
happy to put
listening.
this up online.
Hopefully, you'll find some of it that's useful,
Oh, absolutely.
and yeah, come by tomorrow. We'll see. Hopefully, I've done two versions of this,
Hmm.
trying to get it right. And the first time I did it with my son and his friends.
Yeah.
And the second time I did it up in Rockford, and I had Dave McGarry was the British commander, Dave Wesely was Admiral Coburn,
Hmm.
and a whole bunch of the other sort of old timers were spread out among the American team.
Good. Well, you got to have some experience with the Americans.
Yes, well,
When you got to
and
have when you have
well, what
kids.
was good was is that they didn't know a lot about the battle,
Hmm.
so we could recreate a lot
Yeah.
of what really happened.
Hmm.
But it was interesting because, for example, Dave was fairly cautious. He wasn't as aggressive as General Ross was, and So instead of immediately going for the bridge, he decided to burn the town down.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Americans said, well, we're going to go save the town. And so they crossed the bridge. And now they're on the wrong side of the bridge.
Yep.
And then he fires the rockets.
Mm-hmm.
The rockets turned out to be a complete dud.
Mm-hmm.
But more to the point, when the British regulars attacked, they had no place to. Oh, he also
Mhm.
found the ford over the river.
Oh yeah, to the north.
Yeah, which is actually up here. And the river is fordable. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, the defense of the bridge was